Okay, next one up is a 1978, I believe it's a Conn 16H. And what's the difference between the 16H, the 14H, and the 18H? Well, I'll tell you. Let's get the case open. If you buy this one, understand that the case is busted here. I put a new latch on it over here. There's a new latch on it over here. Okay, there we go. Look at that. Okay, so the 16, we all know that the 18H, at least I think we do. The non-Coprion 18H is a 500 bore, 8-inch bell. The 16H is a 500 bore, 7.5-inch bell. So what's the big whoop? Well, you know, they didn't make as many 16Hs as they did the 18H and the 14H. Probably more 14Hs initially than anything else. And the 14H is the 484 bore, which is the same bore that they used on all their small bores. You know, their 4H, their 10H, their 24H, the 44H. But yeah, you can see it says Director. And you see a bunch of these out there, you know, for a song. But, you know, like I said, I put a lot of work into this. This is not going to be sold for a song, but it'll be sold pretty good. But yeah, so the 16H is actually nice. Again, it's a nice horn. Like many horns made in the early years. This was, of course, after they discontinued Pan American. Just the build quality of the horns back then weren't quite like they are today. You know, I remember talking to a gentleman who was a rep at one of the makers' booths over at NAMM, and I'm just like, so what's the difference between a student horn and let's say like an intermediate and pro horn? And his words to me were, well, student horns, you're just pumping them out as fast as you can. You know, you're not using a lot of fancy, you know, build processes and this and that. And okay. So maybe that's today, okay, but back in the day, that wasn't the case. The student level horns were built oftentimes, and more times than not, with the same standards they were building their pro horns. The only difference is that there was a lack of nickel. Oftentimes it was still the same slide. How they put the bell together may have mattered. Like some of them are two-piece bells, some of them are one-piece bells. If you look at this one doesn't have the shooting stars. This has the different paisley type design up at the top. And then let me see if it says, it doesn't say on the horn down here, but I know it's a 16H. I don't even know if it says down here, because a lot of the Conns made at a certain time weren't even labeled. They were just labeled Director. I don't even think it has a model number on it. Actually, to look at it, yeah, I don't see a model number on it. You know, what I can do is I can take my calipers to it and double check. So here's my calipers. Let's see here. Open that up. Okay, and give me a second. Okay, let's take a look and see what these are. That's closer to probably what it is. So I'm sure this is the 484 small bore. Okay, so this wouldn't make it, this would not make it a 16H. This would make it a 14H. So 0 out. Okay, so my bad. It's a 14H. Well, at least it's a 14H slide. And then, okay, now for the next measurement. This is well, it's a 7.5-inch bell. Not an 8-inch bell. So it's a 44 14H, then a 7.5-inch bell. The 16H is a 7.5-inch bell with a 500 slide. The 18H is a 500 bore slide with an 8-inch bell. So that's the difference between the three Directors there. And then they progressed and made some newer Director models later, like the 20, I think the 22 or the Conn 23. I think those are the numbers for those. And the early models are made really well. And they're made with the same standards they were making their pro horns with, and that is for certain 100% true when it comes to Olds and Reynolds, because they were two of a kind. They were two good friends. They worked together. They worked in the same factory, and they're two grumpy, strict German guys or Eastern European descent guys, and it was like everything has to be made exactly the same, with the same tolerances and the same standards, and nothing's going to be cut. So if I ever put up, like I said, an Olds Ambassador or Reynolds Medalist, you can bet your money that those horns are made like the pro level horns, and they were made at the utmost highest manufacturing standards possible for the technology they had at that time. So don't discount that, especially in the world of today when you've got all kinds of stuff being pumped out of Asia and different varied places. You can always count on an ambassador and a Reynolds medalist to be made absolutely at the high standards. Okay, let's move on to the next horn. Okay, this one is in a vintage case, but the horn is a 1972 model, and it's the Conn 77H. Let's take a look. Okay, let's pop open these rusty latches. When I bought the horn, it didn't have a case, and I happen to have this one, so you can even see the vintage badge there. And the case was okay. I had to do some work on the case to kind of get it back. Like I had to add no, I didn't have to add any. Yeah, I had to add a new leather strap right here. Okay, see, I got it covered. Okay, here we go. So this whole horn was covered in sort of this bronzy lacquer that was spotty all over the place. So I left it on the slide, and they may just leave it on the slide. But here's the thing with the 77H. If you look at the top, and that is also known as the Connquest. If you were to read up on the Connquest, Conn had marketed this as the professionalized student horn, which is just, in my opinion, just BS. I think they mismarketed this horn altogether, completely altogether. First of all, you've got the same slide that you have on the 6H with the nickel sleeves down here at the bottom. The only difference between this slide and a 6H slide is that this has a brass crook as opposed to a nickel crook. Okay, because the 6Hs have the nickel crook. Most of the pro horns had a nickel crook. This one did not have a nickel crook. And as far as I'm concerned, that does not make it a professional horn because everything else about it is pretty spectacular. Look at the top here, and we have the nickel up here in the top. It doesn't have the offset tuning slide. Like one sleeve would be on the outside, one sleeve would be on the inside. These are both on the inside. So again, engineering-wise, I don't know what the difference is that makes both inside, both, because the box, like you look at a box 6, box 8, box 12, box 16, it's the inside on both sides. So, but with the Conn, they have them, you know, asymmetrical. And then the 77H has a 7.5-inch bell. It doesn't have an 8-inch bell like the 6H. Okay, and then you can tell that this one was a little bit newer because it didn't have any of the fancy etching on the bell. It just has this right here. 77H. And that style of lettering is indicative of the Abilene horns. But I can tell you this is a good horn. Why? Because I tore it all apart, took all the dents out, cleaned it up, and put it back together again. So this is put together very well. But the 77H has a totally different sound. I actually prefer the 77H. I prefer the 77H over the 6H sound because of the lack of the bell ring. You know, the larger the bell gets, the more ring it has. So that's why on some horns, like when you get to the concert horns, like the 88H is going to be an 8.5-inch bell, and you get to the basses, and basses are going to be 9.5, you know, large bells there. But that having that larger bell gives it a little more ring at the end because the bell material, you know, is thinner as it gets out to the edge, and then there's the bead at the very end. And some of the beads, like on all the beads are soldered shut to give that support around that, so it limits the ring at the end of the bell. Some horn makers will put a wire inside of that bell so it rattles when you play to give it a little more sizzle on that, and some will put no wire and they'll like half fold it over, and I think that's called a French bead. And then if you look at some of the old Selmers, the bead is actually, it's a flat bead, you know, it's flattened, there's no roundness to it, and it's kind of almost like a garland because it's usually about like that wide, and it's kind of ornate. And then you have, like, you know, the Olds and the Reynolds Contempora and the Getzen Super Deluxe. You have the garland or the krantz, which is that nickel or other metal that goes around the edge of the bell. That's usually about 3/4 of an inch wide, and again, that's designed to limit the ring on the bell to give a more direct projecting sound, which was kind of necessary back in the big band days because a lot of them were playing without amplification. You know, there was no microphone set up front to mic the band, and like with the old Super, you know, it was a red brass, and whenever you get a red brass bell, it softens and absorbs more of the vibration, and it makes it sort of a creamier, softer sound. You know, that's when we look at the Conn 18H with the copper bell, the Coprion bell. That's like a one-piece copper bell, and I was playing it last night, and it's very dead because the metal is so soft, and that makes a wonderful solo horn, especially if you're going to be up in the mic, because it makes the tone very warm. And but with the yellow brass is brighter, and of course when you get to nickel, it doesn't get much brighter than that. Nickel, or like with the King Silver Sonics, those are solid sterling silver, just like your silverware, and that's very hard, and that's what gives that ring and response. So anyway, 77H, great horn. Don't call it a student horn, because it ain't. Okay, I wouldn't even call it an intermediate horn. It's wonderful. It's a wonderful horn. Okay, let's move on to the next one.